Good morning, church. It's a blessing to be with you today. I really wanted to be with you all last Sunday. I ended up coming down with COVID, which is why I'm moving close to you all. I just want y'all to be able to identify with your preacher. No, I'm kidding. I want to just give a thanks to Dr. Ashlock that was here last Sunday. I hope you all enjoyed him. I asked Mindy when I got home. I asked her, I said, well, how was this lesson? She said it was great. And then she started telling me everything about his lesson. All of his stories, especially the one about leaving the ball game that was on TV and going and seeing his wife's quilt. And then Mindy began to directly apply that portion of his lesson to me. So I feel blessed even though I wasn't even here. But Dr. Ashlock was so complimentary toward Eastside and this church family. He told me that if we ever wanted him to come back, that he'd be glad to. And I said, well, I got to be kind of careful because if the preacher does a better job than the normal preacher, that guy's out. So anyway, it's just the threat that I live with in my life. But anyway, I'm looking forward this morning to looking at this text in Matthew chapter 7. We're talking about a great life following a good God. Today is one of these encounters with Jesus, this message that he has for his disciples that is really transformational. I mean, if you will hear what Jesus is saying and put it literally into practice in your life, I believe you're going to experience incredible joy and blessing in your life. A few weeks ago, there was a new coffee store or shop that opened up here in Graham. Just one more place for my money to depart my hands and wallet for the sake of my children. I don't know what it is about specialty coffee, but they think they deserve it. And I'm sure a lot of you think the same thing as well. Well, Mindy and I were out and about. We were driving around, and we decided we wanted to get a gift certificate for Hannah so she could enjoy some coffee at this new coffee store. So we came in the drive-thru, and it was full. There were lots of cars there. It was just recently, newly opened up. And I pulled up, and they said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, we would like a gift card." And the person over the intercom said, she said, "Why don't you just pull around and we'll take care of things there?" Well, there were 2 or 3 cars in front of us, and there were several cars right behind us. And when we came around, I just handed them my debit card, and they rung it up, and then they began to hand me 4 or 5 coffees. And I was like, no, I'm the one that said I just wanted a gift card. And what they had done is they had charged me like $45 or so for 4 coffees, which told me I'm at the wrong place to begin with. I mean, my cup of coffee is about 25 cents. Are you kidding me? But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So anyway, so I was like, no, I think we got the wrong order. And they looked at the receipt, and it's like, oh, those are the people that are behind you. And I was thinking, I want to be a nice guy, but I don't want to pay $45 for their coffee back there behind me. Anyway, and the guy they were embarrassed and said, "Hey, can you pull over to the side and we'll get everything fixed." So I pulled over to the side, and I waited. And I waited. And I waited. While 3 or 4 more cars came through the line. I'm like, So I got out of the car, and I walked over to the counter, and I'm sure to the displeasure of the guy that was pulling up, like I'm holding him up from getting his coffee. And here I am standing outside of the drive-in window with this receipt and my debit card. And the guy says, "Give me your card." He said, "Go back to your car, and I'll bring you the gift card along with your reimbursement here in just a moment." So Minnie and I, we were waiting, and we were there. Now, I felt really sorry for this young man because I saw the look of fear on his face. Like when he came out of the back of this coffee store, this drive-through coffee place, he had this look on his face like, okay, here we go. I'm about to get blasted right now. So here he is. He's manned up. He's walking. I see that he's got several coupons and gifts to offer to make well the situation. But I could see the look on his face, and he was braced for a verbal lashing. And Mindy and I, we had some margin. Like, we had time. We weren't in a rush. We weren't really doing anything. And I've noticed about me that when I have margin in time, I tend to be a little more at ease rather than all ramped up. Anyway, the guy comes walking up. Mindy and I, we're talking and visiting. It's really, for us in this moment, which is rare, it's not a big deal. And the guy comes up, "Sir, I'm so sorry," and he gives me this whole stuff. I said, "Look, it's okay. It's like, I know y'all are new. This is probably a new system for you. It's good." "No, sir, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry." And he just went on, and I'm like, "Hey, it's okay." And then I saw this another look on his face like, "You got to be kidding me. This guy can't be for real. How could I be treated so nice when I'm, really in a situation where I'm maybe not being that deserving or whatever?" And Mindy and I, we were talking about that very situation. He was ready to just get blasted. And we're like, "Hey, it's all right. All good. Life can go on." He was prepped. He was ready. Because it's so common, isn't it? It's so common for people to be lambasted and verbally assaulted in all kinds of ways. We just live at a hostile time. Jesus, 2,000 years ago, gave us a teaching to remove this abusive interrelationship issue that we all have. And he says it like this. He said in Matthew chapter 5, Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5. By the way, I want to back up and just give a little side note. I was a really nice guy that day, but I'm not always that way, okay? So I don't want to give you all the illusion of a perfect preacher or perfect person. I certainly am not. I am very guilty. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I'm so guilty. I was thinking about judgment this week. It's been on my mind, and the other day I went to Stuff Mart. There's another name for that store. It's a really big mart that's down there. I call it the Stuff Mart. So I had gone to the Stuff Mart, and I went inside, and I pulled out a basket, and I started walking with that basket. Have you, any of you, yeah, you already know where I'm going. You know the basket that I'm talking about. Evidently, there's more than one. You get in, and it's like, bam, 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 bam. You're going down the hallway, and everybody can hear you. They're all looking. It's like, bam, 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 bam. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And the thought I had was, who is the idiot cart guy? I'm assuming it's a guy. It could be an idiot cart girl. I just want to be gender inclusive. It could be an idiot cart girl. Who's the idiot that couldn't hear this when they pushed it up here and put it so some customer would get this, And so I'm going back. And so that's my thought that I have in my head. Who's the dummy that can't figure this stuff out? Why do y'all do this to your customers? Bam, bam, bam. Stuff Mart. Bam, bam, bam. That's how I feel about stuff. Bam, bam, bam. I go back and I pull one out. I'm like, okay, this one's working okay. And so then I go do my shopping. A few minutes later, I see a woman that's pushing this basket, and she's going down the hallway. Bam, 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 bam. And I was like, are you that dumb? Can't you go? And then I caught myself. Not only had I been judging of Stuff Mart, I just judged this lady. And I've been thinking about not judging people all week. Matter of fact, I thought, John, maybe here's what you need to do. Have y'all ever journaled about all your blessings? Count your blessings, name them one by one. And you get a sour mood, and then some good Christian person, you just need to count your blessings. Start listing them out. Start thinking the positive rather than the negative. Count your blessings. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? The thought came to my mind, what if I kept a ledger of all the judgmental things I've thought and said in 1 week? And then the thought goes, no, I don't want to do that. So, but wouldn't that be interesting for you and I to do, to keep a log and a ledger of all the ways, the thoughts that we have, the words that we say, the little aspects where we're just dogging on people, we're just nitpicking and condemning about everything that they're saying and they're doing. Jesus teaches us, he teaches us a better way. Matter of fact, when you put all of these aspects of Jesus' teaching at work in your life, you're just going to find more joy. You're going to find more peace. You're going to find more contentment. You're going to be at ease. Jesus says, look, he begins with a command. This is an imperative. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, I'm coming back. With the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. So, I thought, wouldn't it be neat to ask ourselves how much judgment we would like to have? Like, do we really enjoy others judging us? I mean, so Jesus says there's a measure. And the measure you use, now I had a little bit of an interpretation problem here. Some of you Bible scholars can maybe help me figure out. If I judge others, the measure that I use is the measure used against me. Is that measurement coming from God? Is God going to measure me, or will others measure me? And the solution or the resolution that I came to is, I don't think it's one or the other. I actually think it's both, because life is reciprocal, isn't it? What goes around comes around. With the measure you use, think about this. Not only will God use you by the standard that you judge others, but others will judge you as well. Like, if you want to be judged and critiqued and condemned, well, then do that for others. And you're going to find yourself in those kind of ways. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be neat if this represented a measuring cup? How many of y'all would like to have this kind of measurement poured out in judgment on you? Right here? That's a big batch right there, ain't it? Can I say ain't it? Are there any English teachers here? I'm just saying. I mean, that's a big measurement. I mean, let's pick one. Before you leave today, let's pick one. Do you want people to judge you with this kind of measurement? I picked out some smaller ones. I mean, do you want folks to judge you with this kind of measurement? Let them heap it out on you this much? You want to be measured and judged in this way? I'll use a school bus. Or would you like for people to judge you with this kind of cup? Or, I got one more. What if you chose none? Is it any of our jobs to be judgmental toward others? Jesus seems to say it's not. But he did say, look, it's going to be proportional. If this is how you heap scorn on others, then expect this kind of scorn to be heaped on you. That's just how life works. And then Jesus tells this amazing story, or he gives a metaphor or imagery here in the text. And it goes like this. He goes, why do you look at the speck or the twig of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to this plank that's in your eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from another person's eye. Now, the two most common quoted teachings of Jesus. One is John 3:16, for God so loved the world, right? And what verse is the other most quoted verse? It's this one right here, about do not judge, or you too will be judged. And a lot of folks will quote Jesus to silence their critics, to go like, you don't have the right to tell me I'm wrong. But I don't think that's what Jesus is saying here. I want to clarify that. There's using good judgment, and then there's being judgmental. using good judgment, I want to say like this. This is what good judgment is. I love you. I love you. I want God's best for your life. I stand in solidarity with you. And I have seen some things that concern me. And I want what's best. Does Jesus ever teach us to confront? I mean, so some people say, well, you can't judge me. You know, the Bible says don't judge. But then again, I mean, in the same book, the same teacher, Jesus, in Matthew chapter 18 says this, in verse 15, Matthew 18:15. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault just between the two of you. Same Jesus, same red letters in my Bible. If they listen to you, you will have won them over. See, here's the point. The point is, we're not to be judgmental and condemning. We definitely don't come, we're not called to have a spirit of superiority. I think when I was thinking about the basket at Stuff Mart and then the lady, that was judgmental. That was like a spirit of superiority. Like I literally looked down on both Stuff Mart and that lady that got that basket. And why are you going through the store doing that? Isn't that hilarious? Isn't that crazy, right? And I could give y'all 100 other examples just from this week. Now, that's just my life. But I'm going to stop with one. That's enough confession from me for the day. So we don't come before others in a spirit of superiority. We are a sinner. We're sinners, saved by God's grace. We've been gifted by the Father as sons and daughters of Him. What does that song say? Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling. There's this humility that we as Christians should all have with regard, before we ever start pointing the sins out of others. And Jesus says, first of all, he gives this hilarious metaphor of a speck in another person's eye, while there's this huge plank in your own. And Jesus calls us not to practice speckology. Y'all know what speckology is? Speckology is identifying and condemning the shortcomings in the lives of everybody around you. That's speckology. When the reality is that we have plankitis. You know what plankitis is? Plankitis is an inflamed sense of superiority that distorts self-awareness and renders a person incapable of recognizing personal faults and flaws. In other words, we all have blind spots. Y'all remember the story? I know you do. In Luke chapter 18, where Jesus tells the story about a tax collector. I mean, he's pretty much a thief, and he's practicing treason against his own people. A tax collector and a Pharisee. And they're both praying. What does the Pharisee do? Lord, I want to thank you that I'm not like these people, murderers, thieves, adulterers, and he lists off a list of people that are awful sinners. And then he says, or like this sinner. Meanwhile, the tax collector beat his breast and said, Lord, have mercy on a sinner like me. Jesus says, which one went away justified? It wasn't the one who was judgmental, was it, church family? It was the man that asked for mercy. And because you and I have received mercy, we are to give mercy. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. And so God calls us not to be speckologists that suffer from plankitis, in which we're completely blinded in our lives. We can't make those judgments. Let me share with you just some observations, and I'll wrap it up. Some ways in which we misjudge people. We misjudge people by appearances. We do. We misjudge people by appearances all the time. I remember this when we were back in Louisiana, and Phil Robertson was one of our elders. He's the duck commander, and y'all have seen Duck Dynasty show. Phil would always get pulled aside at an airport because he looked like a terrorist with that big beard. And they would do he could not go through a single place without getting the old pat down, you know. They didn't know he was a river rat from Louisiana. Several years later, after Duck Dynasty started, Alan was telling me a story about his brother Jace. And Jace had gone to meet the Trumps at Trump Tower in New York City. And Jace had his big old beard, and he went inside, and he was waiting in the foyer to meet Eric Trump. And one of the guys that was working there, a security guard, came over to him and said, "Sir, come with me." And so Jace just follows along. He thinks he's going to meet Eric. Well, the security guard takes him outside and tells him to get out and stay out and don't ever come in here again. And meanwhile, he was scheduled to meet Eric Trump, you know. Isn't it funny how we will judge people and we'll make assumptions about them and based on appearances, and we'll cut them off just like that. Remember when Samuel the prophet was going to anoint a new king over Israel, and he comes before Jesse's sons, and he has Jesse pull the sons out. And Samuel the prophet, a man of God, he's sitting there, and he sees Eliab, who's Jesse's oldest son, and he goes, "Whoa, surely he's the Lord's anointed. Here's old Eliab, probably 6'2", 6'3", big old boy, you know." And the Lord says, "No, the man looks at the outward appearance. The Lord looks where? The heart." And it wasn't the biggest boys in Jesse's household. It was actually the old runt, you know. There's old David, the youngest that's out there. We judge people by appearances all the time. We judge people by gossip. We hear something about somebody, and man, then actually when we do have the courage to get to know another person that we've heard things about, then our attitude changes. We will misjudge people by their past. Every one of us, preacher very included, has a sordid past, things that they've done, things that they regret. Should we be judged by our worst moments in our past? Right? We can misjudge people by comparison. We can misjudge people by assuming things that they are really bad, or, oh, they're probably better. They think comparison. We can misjudge people by assuming things that they are really bad, or, oh, they're probably better. They think they're better than all of these things. 1 Corinthians 13:7 says this: "Love bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never fails." It bears with others without assuming their worst. It believes all things. It gives folks the benefit of the doubt. It hopes the best at all times, and it endures all things, even when things don't turn out right. So, well, here's what we need, church family. We need an antidote. We need an antidote. And Jesus gives us that. He gives us an antidote. He says, take the plank out of your own eye. In other words, don't judge. Don't critique. Don't negatively, unless you're going to stand in solidarity and humility with another. Don't do it. Don't do it. And so before you leave today, I want you to decide for yourselves, what measuring apparatus will I use to judge others? Because Jesus says, with the measure that you use, it will be measured to you. If I were to ask you today, right now, not what's going to happen after church and the challenge for the weeks ahead, but right now, which measuring cup best represents you right now? And then which one best represents the kind of measure that you want to use in Jesus' name? If we can serve any of you all this morning, we're going to have this song of invitation. Greg, come up and lead us. If we can pray for you, love on you, care for you, support you, we ask you